One Thursday night, I was called in by a friend who works in the police department's tech surveillance division. He never shared much about his job before. That night, though, his voice over the phone carried a weight that made me uneasy. He wanted to show me something he'd been dealing with, something disturbing enough that it haunted him even after leaving work. When I got to his place, he was already halfway through a bottle, visibly shaken, yet eager to offload. I asked him what this was all about, and he said it had to do with the surveillance network that monitored our entire city. Thousands of cameras blanketing the streets, the neighborhoods, even dark, forgotten corners most people never see. Usually, he'd just sort footage into mundane classifications. But a small fraction of what he saw, things no one should ever see, ended up in a hidden archive. An archive so secret, even the police rarely acknowledge its existence. He hesitated before pressing play on the first clip. The screen lit up with CCTV footage from a dimly lit street downtown, showing a single woman walking alone at 3 a.m. She glanced over her shoulder repeatedly, visibly frightened, but there was no one there. No sound, just the eerie silence of the city at night. Then, as she turned the corner, something invisible seemed to grip her. Her feet lifted from the ground as if an unseen hand had her by the throat. She thrashed, gasping, before going limp and dropping back to the pavement. My friend paused the video, his face pale. The official report said it was a hit and run, he muttered. I swallowed hard, processing the horrific sight of this poor woman's death. Her terror, her futile struggle against whatever unseen force had seized her. My friend poured another drink, his hands trembling. That's just the beginning, he said, clicking to the next video. This one was tagged Lincoln's Shadow. The footage was even grainier, captured in an underground subway station just after midnight. At first, the platform was empty, a long stretch of dimly lit concrete with no sign of life. Then, from the dark tunnel, something crawled into view. It was a man, if you could still call it that. His body moved on all fours, twisted and broken, with limbs bent in directions no human bones should go. He scuttled across the ground like a crab, dragging his body jerkily. His hair hung down, obscuring his face, and his clothes were tattered and filthy. The creature crept toward the subway stairs, then climbed up them, one stilted step at a time, until he reached the turnstiles. Without breaking stride, he contorted himself to slip between the bars and vanish into the shadows. The video cut to outside the station entrance. A few minutes later, the same twisted figure emerged, clutching something small and limp between its teeth. A stray cat, or what was left of it. He vanished into the nearby woods, taking his gruesome meal with him. My friend said the creature had been seen multiple times over the past year, always in that same area. The police had never found a trace of him, nor any evidence of his existence beyond the chilling footage. They say he was once a man, a lawyer, who lost his family in a fire and went mad, he whispered. But that doesn't explain whatever he's become. He reached for the final video. This one. I don't even know what to call it. His voice was a hollow echo as he clicked play. The screen flickered to life, showing 5 different downtown intersections, each one completely deserted in the dead of night. But in the center of each intersection, a small orb of light glowed, floating just above the ground. The orbs pulsed in sync, like they shared a heartbeat. They began to expand, morphing into clouds that twisted and swirled, each resembling a dark, otherworldly fog. One by one, people started to appear in the frames, wandering late-night pedestrians drawn toward the clouds, like moths to a flame. Some stumbled as if intoxicated, others walked with purpose, but all seemed hypnotized by the glowing shapes. The clouds pulsed brighter as the people drew near, then shifted, wrapping around them like smoke. One man stepped into the cloud entirely and vanished. Another followed, and another, until each person who had approached the eerie fog was swallowed up. Seconds later, they re-emerged, but they were different. They moved stiffly, their eyes blank, their faces expressionless. They separated, each walking in a different direction, as if they'd been reset. I was frozen, barely breathing, staring at the screen. My friend leaned closer and whispered, "One of those people was my boss." The next day, he didn't remember where he'd been or why he was out that late. And he wasn't the same. He watched the footage from his own surveillance network, saw himself walk into that cloud, but he had no memory of it. He looked at me with haunted eyes. "I'm scheduled to meet with him tomorrow to discuss my job performance," he said, his voice trembling. "And I think he knows I've seen too much." I didn't know what to say. My mind was racing, terrified by the implications. My friend shut off the screen, silence filling the room. "If you don't hear from me after tomorrow," he whispered, "you'll know why." The next day, I waited for his call. Hours passed, and by evening, I knew it was futile. He was gone, lost to whatever was lurking in those videos, hiding in the shadows of our city. I never went looking for him. It was about 2 in the morning, and the call had come in like any other. Disturbance at the old industrial park on East Broad. Suspicious figures reported. I was new to the precinct, and night shifts like these were supposed to be quiet. The most action we got was breaking up fights outside bars. But that night, the radio crackled with something that didn't fit the usual pattern. A disturbance at that hour in the industrial district meant we were in for something off. I tried to ignore the chill crawling up my spine as I drove out to the scene. The industrial park had been abandoned for years, a labyrinth of decaying warehouses and rusted machinery that no one wanted to go near, not even during the day. It was a place that had an aura, like the air itself was heavy, thick, and wrong. When I arrived, the area was dead silent, with only the faintest glow of moonlight cutting through the fog. I turned off the engine and radioed in. "This is Unit 7. I'm on the scene at East Broad. No sign of suspects." Static. "Unit 7, do you copy?" Nothing. Just dead air. That was when I noticed the shadows. The warehouses loomed like giants around me, and for a moment, I thought I saw movement. A figure, darting just beyond the reach of my flashlight. I moved cautiously, gun at my side, sweeping the area with my beam. And then, footsteps echoed. Not just one set, several. They were light, quick, almost like a pattering, but every time I tried to focus on the sound, it seemed to shift, coming from somewhere else. "Hello?" I called out, feeling a prickle of unease. "Police. If anyone's out here, make yourself known." Silence answered me, thick and oppressive. Then, from somewhere to my left, I heard a faint, high-pitched laugh. I swung my flashlight around, heart hammering, but the beam only illuminated an empty alleyway between 2 warehouses. I took a step forward, nerves taut as wires. That was when I saw it. Something peeking out from the shadows at the far end of the alley. A pale face, eyes wide and unblinking, staring right at me. And then, it vanished. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. "Come out now," I yelled, the tremor in my voice betraying me. As I moved forward, the air seemed to thicken, like I was walking through invisible tar. And that was when the smell hit me. Thick, metallic, and nauseating, like copper left to rot in the sun. I knew that smell. Blood. I rounded the corner and there it was. A figure slumped against the wall, half hidden in shadow. It was one of ours. A rookie I'd seen around the precinct, his uniform dark with blood. His head was tilted to the side, eyes open but empty, mouth twisted in a silent scream. I stumbled back, bile rising in my throat. My instincts screamed at me to turn and run, but my feet were rooted to the ground. The air around me seemed to pulse, as if alive. I forced myself to move, reaching shakily for my radio. "This is Unit 7, I managed, voice barely above a whisper. "Officer down. Repeat, officer down. Send backup." Static hissed in response. I tapped the radio, but all I got was dead air. Then behind me, that same faint, high-pitched laugh echoed, chilling me to the bone. I turned slowly, flashlight trembling in my grip. At the edge of the warehouse, barely visible in the shadows, a figure stood, a silhouette, too thin, too long-limbed, almost human, but wrong. The figure's head tilted to one side, observing me with a curious, almost childlike interest. I raised my gun, hand shaking. "Don't move." My voice broke, barely louder than a whisper. The figure took a step forward, then another, moving slowly into the beam of my flashlight. My stomach turned. Its skin was stretched tight over sharp, protruding bones, and its face was pale, almost featureless, except for two sunken, hollow eyes that seemed to drink in the darkness around them. Its lips parted, revealing sharp, too long teeth, stained and broken, and then it spoke. "Officer? Alone?" The voice was strange, a rasping mimicry of human speech, as if it hadn't spoken in years. I took a step back, pulse racing. "Get on the ground," I yelled, even though I knew it wouldn't listen. The thing tilted its head, eyes glinting with an almost amused glint. And then it moved. 1 second it was standing at the edge of the flashlight, and the next it was right in front of me, face inches from mine. I stumbled back, barely managing to keep my grip on my gun. It laughed, a sound that echoed around me, filling the air with an inhuman guttural glee. I raised my weapon, firing once, twice, point blank. The shots echoed in the empty alley, but the creature didn't even flinch. Instead, it leaned closer, whispering in that same twisted imitation of a voice. "Can't run, officer. Watch." It lifted a long skeletal finger, brushing it against my cheek. The skin burned where it touched, like dry ice searing into my flesh. I staggered back, gasping, and the creature's form flickered, blurring in and out of focus. Its eyes grew wider, darker, until they were two endless pits of shadow, pulling me in. I turned and ran. I didn't care where I was going, didn't care if I had backup or not. All I knew was that I had to get out of that place. My feet pounded against the ground as I tore through the maze of warehouses, the sound of that laughter following me, echoing in my mind, even as I sprinted faster, desperate to escape. Finally, I burst out onto the main road, the fog parting as I reached the open air. I stumbled to my car, heart racing, lungs burning, and locked the doors, fumbling to start the engine. The laughter faded, replaced by an unnatural, eerie silence. As I sped away, I risked one last look in the rearview mirror. And there, standing at the edge of the road, bathed in the dim glow of the taillights, was the figure, watching me, its face twisted into a smile that seemed almost grateful. I never went back to that district, never answered another call near East Broad, and every time I closed my eyes after that night, I saw its face, that smile, lingering in the darkness. I don't know what it was, but I know one thing for sure. It's still out there, watching, waiting. It was late, pitch dark, and pouring rain when I got the call. Usually I ignore unknown numbers at odd hours, but that night, something urged me to pick up. The voice on the other end was frantic, barely coherent, gasping for air. "Come, Lincoln Avenue. Now. Please." It was my old friend from the force, someone who didn't call unless things had gone way beyond ordinary. He'd always been tough, never flinched at even the worst crime scenes, but now he sounded terrified. I threw on my coat, grabbed my keys, and drove out, windshield wipers struggling to keep up with the downpour. When I arrived, the entire street was lit up with red and blue lights, but there were barely any people around. A few officers huddled, murmuring, eyes darting like they'd just witnessed something unspeakable. But what drew my attention was the single police cruiser parked at an angle in the middle of the road, its headlights illuminating a spot where rain pooled and shimmered unnaturally. I walked up, my friend standing by the car. He looked at me, jaw clenched, eyes hollow. "You came. You're going to regret it." The unease in my stomach twisted tighter. "What happened?" I asked, but he just gestured to the footage monitor in the back seat of the cruiser. It took me a moment to understand what I was looking at. The black and white surveillance footage showed Lincoln Avenue, empty at first. Then, out of nowhere, a woman stumbled into view. Rain blurred the screen, but I could see her looking over her shoulder, eyes wide, mouth open as if screaming. She ran, hair plastered to her face, but no one else was there. Or so I thought. My friend clicked to another angle. This time, she looked like she was being pulled by something invisible. She floated. No, she was lifted, straight off the ground by her throat, hanging midair, body limp and swaying. And then, just like that, she dropped. The video ended abruptly, screen fading to black. "What am I looking at?" My voice sounded steadier than I felt. He didn't answer, just opened another file. The footage switched to an underground station, dark and empty. The camera switched to night vision, and there, moving down the platform, was something, or someone, but it crawled on all fours, backward, inhumanly flexible. It twisted its head to look directly at the camera, pale eyes reflecting like an animal's in the night. "People say he's a drifter," my friend whispered. "But the truth is, we have no idea who or what he is." Just as the man-creature reached the staircase, the footage cut to the street above. I could barely believe it was the same figure as he crawled out of a sewer grate, his body contorted in impossible angles, dressed in shredded clothes, dragging something small and furry by the tail. He glanced around before scuttling back down the sewer. The street was silent, nothing but rain. I pulled back from the monitor, swallowing hard. "What is this? Some kind of prank footage?" My friend shook his head, his face pale. "I wish it were. There's more." He switched to another video, this one from just a few nights ago, captured at the same underground station. The grainy image showed a homeless man huddling under the stairs, trying to stay dry from the leak dripping from the ceiling. And then, that same thing crept out from the shadows. The creature watched the man for a while, crouched at an unnatural angle, head tilted. Then, in a flash, it pounced. The homeless man didn't even scream. The creature pinned him down, its movements sharp, quick, brutal. The camera didn't catch everything, but the man's body went still too fast, and soon after, the creature was dragging him away by one leg, disappearing into the dark. I glanced over at my friend. He looked away, ashamed. "They're calling it an accident. Just another homeless man disappearing in the city. But this thing, it keeps coming back to that station, always just after midnight." I wanted to leave, get out of there. But my friend had one last clip to show me. He pulled up footage from the previous week, a busy intersection downtown. The video flickered and zoomed in on a small, strange light pulsing in the middle of the street. It was an orb about the size of a soccer ball, floating in place, with a faint, eerie glow. As I watched, it grew, shifting and changing shape, swirling like a small storm cloud, dense and full of static. Pedestrians started to gather, drawn to it, entranced by the light. One by one, they stepped closer, as if they couldn't resist. Then, without warning, the first person walked right into the cloud and vanished. No scream, no struggle, just gone. Then another and another, until 5 people had disappeared. Seconds later, they reappeared on the other side of the cloud, expressionless, walking in perfect unison, like they were being controlled. They split off in different directions, eyes vacant, moving with an unnatural precision. My friend clicked off the video, his face in his hands. "They don't remember a thing," he muttered. "The reports say they went home, back to their families, back to work. But they're not the same. You can see it. Something's wrong with them." I stared at him, feeling my own fear mirrored in his haunted gaze. "So, why are you showing me this?" He looked at me, his voice barely above a whisper. "I can't unsee it, and neither can you. We're being watched, controlled, taken. The department's covering it up, hiding evidence, labeling it as accidents or natural causes. But we know better. Whatever's out there, it's not human, and it's taking people, changing them." I didn't know what to say. The truth weighed on me, pulling me down, making it hard to breathe. In that moment, standing under the flashing police lights, the rain pouring down, I realized this wasn't some nightmare I could wake up from. It was real as the cold drops on my skin and the empty, haunted look in my friend's eyes. I drove home that night, locking every door, every window, knowing it wouldn't matter. Whatever was lurking out there, hidden in the shadows and behind camera lenses, was getting closer, and I knew no one was safe.